listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska.
So enough about gear for now. I'm sure we'll recover or evaluate some of our gear selections here soon, but let's get into the nitty-gritty about calling. Now, obviously, calling is the primary way of getting moose close to you. There's multiple styles of hunting moose. I mean, you can ambush them if you know where they're going to walk through. If you think you're going to be in a good area, you can just, still hunt for them. I've done all of the above, right? And they all work depending on your terrain and your area and whatnot. But calling is like the pinnacle. Like that's how you get them to come to you. Makes your life a little bit easier. If you know how to do it, you're in the right setting, and and the big thing is if the moose are receptive to it. So this is where I want to pick your brain. I know we've talked about on the show before, our opinions about different things, especially involving calling and whatnot. And but like from your perspective, like break it down as far as like, let's start with just like the reproductive cycles that moose go through in their year, and like when they get into like the heaviest part of the rut pertaining to where it crosses over our hunting seasons, and how that affects the calling from your perspective.
Okay. Well, I guess the, first thing I would say is it doesn't apply across the state evenly.
Yeah, that's true.
You can definitely be looking at places way further south, and their rut's going to start a little bit later and finish up a little later. I mean, you can go all the way down to like places like Wrangell and the Stikine, and rut's going to probably be 2, maybe 3 weeks behind where it is in northern interior, like south side of the Brooks Range, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, just in general, I guess the first thing to start with is they're starting to develop their antlers. Growth is starting to take place as early as like March and April.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's an ongoing thing all summer long. And then probably, we'll say for right around the interior, probably the last week, maybe the last 10 days, August, about when we're recording this, they'll start shedding velvet and start being kind of active with rubbing on trees and brush and stuff like that. And so that's kind of the first step. And then that'll carry on all the way until, I don't know, the first week of September, maybe the first third of September. And then that's when they'll kind of start really focusing on the rut and rounding up cows and breeding and then obviously the peak of rut is going to be after hunting season, and most of them are geared that way for a reason, because it's super effective to hunt during the rut. And then after, depending on all of the situations going on out there, you can have a secondary rut all the way into October.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's kind of the timing of it. About a month later, it's about 28 days. So as far as like how to approach stuff during those time frames, the early season, the way you're going to get attention is maybe some cow calling, and that depends on the area. I mean, there's places where that starts earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You go east and west, that also will change a little bit based on the conditions and the timing of everything. But kind of those first, that first period, if I was trying to get any attention from a bull, I would focus on scraping.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe a little cow call here and there, but the majority of it is all going to be scraping. And
yeah.
And I like a shoulder blade. That's my favorite.
Yep.
As far as another thing that you could have, it'd be a moose magnet. The fiberglass, basically megaphone style.
Those are really good for scraping.
They are. I've used empty bottles, like cut the bottom off of like an oil can or an oil quart, and use that for scraping. Another one that works real good is a layer of like fiberglass resin over a wood boat paddle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can really get that up high, and it carries a little bit more. And I like that because you can also use it almost like a palm.
Yeah.
If you want to flash and try and try and get their attention, like especially if it's visually, if you can see them. I think that's a really good thing to have. Either that or the shoulder blade. Shoulder blade kind of serves both purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, shoulder blades. I mean, obviously, that's the paramount.
Right.
That's as good as it gets, right there.
Right. And I
But-
guess, kind of take a high overview look at this. And the one thing about it is low frequency sounds like moose make, whether in any atmosphere, are the sounds that travel the furthest.
Mm-hmm.
High frequency sounds are real location specific,
Yes.
but they give you real good pinpoint location versus low frequencies that'll travel. I mean, look at whales, and I mean they can communicate across the ocean with low frequency
Mm-hmm.
sound, and so that low frequency stuff that travels, crosses distances is what moose are listening for, and I mean they make low frequency noise for the most part, and you got to think about bull moose having basically a satellite dish on their head.
Right.
And I don't know so much that it redirects the sound, but I think it soaks up the vibration
Yeah.
and kind of has the same effect, right? Of being able to transmit that into the skull and everything, and they're pretty effective at finding that location. I mean, they can almost triangulate a spot, and scraping, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't be too aggressive with it, especially to start with, but I would be, I would definitely do it. I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, you got, if you spend 20 minutes a day doing that, you may just have a moose come strolling through 3 days later,
Yeah.
and probably the biggest thing about moose hunting is time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be patient. I mean, and if you're in a really high density area, you're going to see a lot of moose, but you're still waiting for that legal moose or that big moose or whatever your objective is, if you're trophy hunting versus meat hunting and all of that stuff. But being patient and having time.
Well, and that's exactly follows that point you were just making about they can hear it a long ways away. Is like you might be calling the right spot with the right bull, but where he's at when he hears you, it might take him a little bit to get to you. This isn't one of those like do a 30-minute set and then move on.
Right, right. You're doing a lot of blind calling. I mean, that's really all you're doing, right? I mean, you may be able to call to something, especially later in the rut where it's tuned up and challenge them or get them to break away from other cows to come to your cow call, things like that. But I mean, really, you're blind calling.
Yeah.
And like one of the things that I can tell you happens from time to time is you'll call and nothing will happen. And you'll go back and there'll be tracks right through where you were calling.
Right.
And they go through there in the middle of the night. They start getting a little, they definitely are active way later at night and when it's cooler. And I mean, there's some discussion about, should we move seasons back because it's too warm, things like that. But ultimately it's a lot of it's daylight related. No matter how warm it is, they tend to be moving around late at night. And that's why we were talking about it. You usually find moose later in the evening because they may know exactly where you're at, but they're not going to get up and start moving until.
Exactly.
And so if you do that, I would expect that thing might still be hanging around there.
Yeah.
Especially if you go call in. I would recommend calling and glassing from two different locations. Because it's not going to be like they're on a string, right? It's going to take some time. So you might call, and you want to call on the level, and for me, what I would say is almost like suitable habitat, right? You're not going to get up on a bluff and call from up there because if they're pinpointing where you're at, they're like, there's no moose up there. Why would they be up there? But if you call underneath, down at the bottom, and then get up high and sit and glass that, and you can move around and you got a little more freedom because they're going to be focused on that spot. I mean, yeah, if you're up there, doing your laundry or something on the top of the hill, they might notice, but
yeah. Well, that's Chris can attest to this. Kind of what him and I were doing last year when we were moose hunting together. Is he was up in a stand way up above the tree line where he could see, and I was down on ground level making scenarios. And I would go over to different areas and sneak over to different spots and kind of get away from him and get then closer to him and whatnot. And but then he was just stable right where he was. That way, he could just see whatever was coming in. And that's a good thing to point out what you were saying, how they're going to move, but they might not be like coming out on a string.
Right.
You put that well.
And And, and some of that, right, is I wouldn't call for more than 20 to 30 minutes max. And then I
Mhm.
just hang out and
Yeah.
wait and watch. I mean, if that's your technique for hunting, you're going to be sitting looking over the same patch of ground a lot,
Mhm.
but get familiar with it. I mean, they can materialize out of nowhere. I mean,
Yeah.
just show up all of a sudden. There's a moose standing in the middle of this clearing that you've been looking at all day.
It's so weird how they do that.
Um,
But before we get too far away from this segment, I wanted to ask your opinion and all your experience. There's a lot of theories about what kicks off the rut. What's your educated theory on what kicks off the rut?
Daylight.
Daylight? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that it's daylight driven. I think the level of activity and when they move and things like that is definitely weather generated, but it's daylight.
Mm.
Um, we've there's all kinds of examples of where animals are so photo period. And if you think about it, September 21st, you've got 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness or close anyway. And so I think that, that's a kind of a target time. And I don't know if we talked about it the last time, but I've actually been out at a check station for fish and game, and we had grouse drumming in September. Well, I mean, that's a spring mating behavior, but
Right.
they're all topsy turvy from the daylight being just that perfect time, and they'll start drumming in the middle of fall. Um, so, and so, yeah, I would say that if I had to place any bets on on what's doing it, it's daylight driven. I
Mm.
mean, and you got to think about it, right? So they're starting their antler growth, formation way out in the winter, and then as daylight's reducing, right? We hit the peak of it, and then it starts reducing, and you start getting darkness. And when you really start getting good darkness, isn't too far off from when they start shedding.
Right.
And then after that, it's just kind of the natural progression of things. But yeah, I think it's daylight. I mean, there's so many things even in people that are daylight driven.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So
Yeah. Well, weren't you telling me, Chris, the primeness on fur is actually daylight driven too?
That's
on critters.
I've read stuff about
Yeah.
that. Have you read that, Carl? Or
I
you familiar with that?
haven't really looked into
So
it.
I think we always like kind of assume that it's weather related, and that's a response to like needing to be insulated and have more cover. But stuff I've read that has to do with our light change.
Right. And without diverging too far off of that,
That's right.
the argument that I would have, right, is that doesn't really make sense, because if they're waiting till it's cold to start growing fur,
Mm.
they're not really like they're behind the curve. I mean, it's not like that hair is going to grow in 24 hours,
Right.
right? It's going to take them a while. That's just when
Mhm.
they finally get all primed up is how long it takes for them to regrow, to shed and regrow. And so I don't think it
If
really.
you think about when we start losing a lot of light, though, they start priming up a lot of things start priming up.
I would
pretty
say
good.
if it's a long process from like not just we only have 4 hours of daylight.
Right.
but
No,
yeah.
I'm just saying that if you waited until it was cold to start growing fur.
Oh, if it was based on temperature is what you're saying.
Right. If it was temperature based and you waited to start growing fur until it was cold.
right.
I mean, and if you think about when that's peak, it is when we are really in like the darker periods of the year. And then the other thing too is how much loss of daylight manipulates when that starts taking effect, because we're losing a lot of daylight right now.
Right.
We are.
So I've read varying opinions on this. I don't know. It'd be something worth researching.
Like I said, I think it'd be pretty hard to have it like temperature related, and sure, like from a geography standpoint, it makes sense, right? That you're going to have some stuff, that is in a warmer climate isn't going to have as much hair and things like that. I mean, there's rules like about body size. That's
Right.
why Alaska has bigger moose than the Shiras moose in Colorado, or like all of those things, right? And but I think if they were reacting to the environment to grow like hair, they'd be so far behind that they'd all be dead. So it has to be something that's preemptively primed out. I mean,
Mhm.
and
Well, and that's the theory. Just to cycle back to the moose thing, a lot of people think that the rut is temperature based,
right,
and I think the activity level
100%.
would be temperature based, but kind of the same thing. It's like I don't know. I feel like the daylight thing makes a lot more sense to me, just because, like you said, it's the one consistent thing, and that's what would follow along in the different parts of the state. Why
Right.
people in the South or moose in the South would rut later.
Later, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there, and there's some other things that kind of come with that too, right? Is I think weather's a huge driver in behavior, but that, I mean, and honestly, that's localized. If you think about how big Alaska is, that's localized. I mean, it isn't very often that you have rain from north to south and east to west across the whole state.
Right.
You might have some areas that it's cool and crisp, and some areas that it's cold and soggy, and some areas that it's hot and sunny, even all within the same, potentially even in the same drainage.
Yeah.
And so I mean, there's other factors besides just temperature. That story I was telling about the wind, that's a huge one. I mean, and I don't know how much it drives behavior in the fall time, but when you get over, I want to say it's 20, 25 mile an hour wind, all those moose are bedded down and they're tucked in behind on the lee side of trees and willow patches and just wherever to get out of the wind. And they've got this really super coarse hair that the wind cuts right through. Yeah, it holds a lot of heat until you move it away.
Right. Right.
And so I think that's a big one. Wind and trying to hunt in the wind. You can't call if moose aren't active. You're just sitting there. I mean, you're on an armed camping trip at that point if you're out there in the wind. I mean, and that's to say that you
unless you see a paddle while it's bedded down on a hillside
right.
somewhere, right?
Right. I mean, and I think they will move. And if you think about it once again, especially localized weather patterns, a lot of them are more that calm down later in the evening and at night. And so I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
Right. I think that increases their activity. Now it's cooler. There's less wind. It's dark. All of these things, right? And even though moose are probably the biggest, baddest thing out there for the most part, I mean, a bear can get a moose no problem. So cover of darkness doesn't hurt them. And another thing that and I've heard different stories and things like that, but I don't think that moose are super sensitive to like camp smells. Does like campfires, things like that.
Yeah.
That isn't to say that you should just sit in your chair and call in front of the campfire and hope that a moose stumbles into range.
But sometimes they will.
They will.
Yeah.
I think actually one of the biggest things that attracts moose, especially at the camps, is splitting wood, chopping firewood. I've got a good,
sounds like racks hitting together, probably.
Good story, actually. I was down in Delta. Actually, we were doing that. I was talking about that bull capture in like October that we were doing. And I was down helping a buddy's dad split wood and get it ready for winter. And we were just going. And I had like a 55-inch bull on top of me.
Yeah.
20 yards away. Just going through the trees, just avoiding every little 4-inch spruce tree out there trying to get to me.
Yep.
And I was like, all right, we're taking a break. We're done for a bit. And
yeah.
He was ready.
Well, and I've heard the same stories about chainsaws.
Yeah.
Where that of the chainsaw sounds like a cow call. And that's the theory, is that they assume that's.
Yeah. But, as far as that goes, yeah, I think that's a good one. But yeah, I wouldn't be too wrapped up in that. I probably would have my camp. Maybe a quarter mile is a good mark, 200 to 300 yards away from where I'm going to call.
Yep.
And then you can sneak out there in the dark, call, go back to camp, or go up to your glassing spot. Hopefully that's above, or you got a tree stand or something where you got some elevation, and then hang out there and hang out in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And then go back out and sit on that. And I would sit for a while before I get back in to calling. And yeah, it might suck. You got to climb up the hill and then you got to come back down, or up your tree and back down. Or if you've got a second person that's calling, go glass for an hour, a couple hours before, see if there's anything out of place, anything different, and then have them call, and then they can go back and sit by the campfire and make dinner while you're hunting, or they go to their spot, whatever it is. And maybe they're glassing from a different perspective,
Yeah.
looking at it at a different angle, something like that. But
Well, and it's funny what you brought up because we had a huge debate on that whole camp thing last year on the show. Because a listener had written in saying that they had watched an episode of Steve Ranella hunting, and how during that episode he had said that somebody told him never to have a fire during a moose. He's in it'll kill your chances and blah blah blah. And so we kind of all went back and forth on our opinions and everything, and then it just turned out that everybody we talked to from here, I mean, yeah, have moose walking right into camp, right past camp to get across the river or something like that, and coming into chainsaws and firewood cutting and stuff like that. Like they're obviously, you want to be careful. I like what you said about having it a little ways away, but not to make it a huge concern.
right, and I mean, and you don't want something that you got to get on your wheeler to go to your calling spot from your camp,
Exactly,
or get in your boat unless you're going to float, or do something like that where you're quiet, and then the other thing I think is interesting about it is if you're scraping and you're making noise, that's a whole different kind of stimulus than imitating a cow or imitating a bull. And when you do that, now you actually have to worry about scent. You should be playing the wind. You should be thinking about that and a lot of times moose are going to circle downwind to get to wherever that is. And so you want to make sure that you don't smell like you've been out in the woods for 7 days.
Right.
And that's kind of that would kind of be the thing is, right, if you're trying to be a cow or you're trying to challenge a bull to be playing the wind, and think about that, and that kind of gets us into that next little timing. You're into the rut,
right,
and then using cow calls, using bull calls, doing things like that. And I've got mixed opinions, and I mean, I think you kind of have to read the room, but I don't think I would start out challenging. And ideally, what you're really looking for is you're looking for cows, and you're not looking for a single cow. Like, I mean, cool, you find a single cow, you might have something, there might be others you don't see, whatever, but you're not really, you're looking for a group of cows because there's going to be bull there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Once you get into that kind of that second week of September, there's going to be a bull around.
Yeah.
And
that kind of follows through with what the traditional knowledge of that early season calling versus that later season calling, which is, like you had pointed out with the scraping in that early season, something that indicates bull to bull.
Right.
Because the cows aren't going to be in full heat yet, and so they're not going to be calling. Rarely will you hear an authentic moose call in the first week of September, right? And so bull grunts and scraping is pretty much what you've got. But from what I've heard of a lot of people, and pretty much what I've done, is towards that later part of season, it's almost the exact opposite. You flip to almost full cow calls when you're blind calling, and then go to bull calls if you actually know you're working something in the area.
So I would preface that by saying I would not hesitate to put in, like, not the long 30-second drawn out cow call early on, but I wouldn't hesitate to put in a little short cow call in early on.
Yeah, get them snooping around, seeing what's going on.
Get them to come investigate, right? I mean, moose are inherently curious. When we ran bear baits, we had moose coming in to check it out. I mean, and we're not talking anything really cool. We're talking about dead smell, and they would come in and check it out.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was blood and macerated fish, and they would come in and check it out. Moose are pretty curious, and I don't know about bulls necessarily, but if there's a cow around, there's bulls eventually going to be there.
Yep.
So, and I would look. I'm not a huge like nursery area type but if you're in an area that's got a lot of cows with calves, like, there's two things, right? Obviously, there was a bull around here at some point. You got calves, but at the same time, you also have to consider that those cows are not going to be receptive, and they're not going to get rounded up necessarily. They're going to keep moving, keep pushing on. So if you're looking for single cows, not to say that, some place where there's one cow, there's probably going to be more. But don't focus on a cow that has a calf as your bait, so to speak.
Right.
And then, I mean, those are just a few of the observations that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as far as like challenging and things like that, yeah, I think once you get into that rut, I would cow call, but I wouldn't super aggressively cow call. And I would occasionally put in some small, bull grunts.
Mm-hmm.
But what you don't want to do is do these bull calls and sound like the biggest, baddest bull, like you're a 70-inch bull, and that 60 doesn't even want to come in and take a look because you intimidated him right out of there.
Uh-huh.
But if he's looking for cows and you're cow calling, you might get his attention. But if he thinks there's a bull in there, he's going to be a little more active trying to find this.
Yep.
And so I would mingle that in a little bit. I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket with either a cow call or bull call. And then as far as when you have a bull around, then I think you definitely start, like if you got him, you know where he's at and you're just trying to close the distance or have him close the distance. Yeah, bull call.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one thing I would say is when you blow it, because you will.
Yes. Everybody does.
Is kind of your last ditch effort is a good cow call.
Mm-hmm.
Send it, because if he runs away, he's running away anyway, and you may get him to stop. You may get him to pause, hang up,
get a second thought, be like, "What's that?"
Well, even if you stop him,
yeah,
and he just mills there, now you might have an opportunity to go to him, which may or may not be possible or advantageous. Or
he might stop in range.
But
yeah,
whatever it may be, if you get him to stop, at least he's not moving.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the scenarios, what you were talking about, that's another thing. When I was calling for Chris last year, that's when I would move around like that and go. I would cow call on one side, and then I would bull grunt, smaller bull grunts on another side.
Yeah,
just to create that scenario a little bit.
We were getting a lot of cow calls back there.
We were getting cow calls, and we had a couple of grunts. You saw the one bull come through. What was that, like 900 yards?
That was a nice bull too.
Yeah.
Well,
we found out later we weren't alone where we were, so there was some competition in the area. But
and I found out there were some good bulls in there too from other intel sources.
But and one thing that it's interesting because I've had mixed experience with this, but one thing I will say is I don't think calling is very effective in urban areas at all.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I've almost been run over by a cow trying to find us. But I think there's so much background noise that I think that those bulls almost tune that out, and they focus on the scent, and just in a small area, in an urban area. I mean, there's only so many places that, hey, you just go to the spot where there's whatever, and you find some cows, and and I think in some of those spots they all move into those areas too, because that's where they can be.
Yes.
So they're like almost geographically forced to be there. But yeah, I don't think that bulls are super responsive in urban areas where there's a lot of like highway noise, or
I've noticed that as well, to be honest with you.
Like you're hearing machinery banging around. Yeah, I mean, it might sound like splitting wood from a mile away, but after they've gone over there 8 times to find the cow or find that bull that they want to challenge and it's not there, they've just zoned that, out of there and tune out everything, all the other noises. And so, and I also would say that a lot of it can be density, right? Like there'll be places where moose are moving. They're trying to get from A to B to get to like, so to speak, a rutting area or something like that. And they're passing through, and you're not going to stop them. No matter what you do, no matter what kind of call. I mean, you could be the best moose caller in the world, and you're not going to stop that thing from trucking right along.
Yeah.
So your only chance is to be in the right spot when that thing gets there. It's set up an ambush type situation. But those are also typically places where you find moose throughout the middle of the day versus the early morning and late evening.
Have you ever noticed moose going nocturnal in urban areas?
I mean, I think they do anyway.
Mm.
I don't know that I would say that it's just in urban areas. I think it's pretty common everywhere, and I don't buy too much into the moon stuff, especially with all the weather and everything. I mean, if they only were active on a full moon at night and all of that, I mean, that we wouldn't have any moose moving forward.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there might be something to that. It might change things a little bit, but I think it's the amount of daylight or moonlight that you would get in a situation like that is pretty minimal anyway.
Yeah, I've never heard or I've never noticed this or seen this in my own personal hunting, but I've heard people talk about in those real pressured areas that they've noticed the moose go more nocturnal.
Oh,
when they get pressured during the day.
I think that's. I mean, I no doubt about it. I mean, but I think they do that in general.
I've heard them get like super vocal in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
They're just on and on and on and on. And you're like, dude, what? And then the next day you can't find them.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and
I've actually had that happen. Like, before I even knew what that was, or before I really cared much, like even around the house, in like come October, you'll start hearing that stuff. You'll be doing stuff outside and you hear moose, and they're just going on and on and on. And usually I'm working late outside, tinkering around because the weather's still decent, and yeah, they're just busy.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I do. I think that they kind of really do go hard nocturnal. And I would say that if you had the right weather, that may change that too.
Gotcha.
Like if you have really snotty nights and good days where it's cool enough, I think they'll be active. And that, I mean, and that's what people are saying, about the weather being not good is it's just hot, right? And it's cooling off at night and things like that. But I don't think that necessarily makes them go nocturnal. I think they were doing that anyway. It's just that you don't have those breaks in the weather that are in the daylight where they're moving around. And I mean, honestly, pretty much anybody that spent a lot of time doing it will tell you early morning and late evening,
Yeah.
And if you're fortunate to have a spot where you can do the early morning thing, that's really nice because you get all day to do that in the daylight.
Right. Yeah, I know that there is a period typically, and weather dependent, around noon where they won't necessarily get up to wander.
Right.
But they'll get up from their beds to forage a little bit. They'll stretch their legs, browse a little bit, and then they go back to bed for the rest of the afternoon. And I know that in that window there, you're not going to necessarily call them to you, but you might be able to turn their head. You know,
well, and
get them to move to where you'll notice them a little bit. But this only works, I believe, in the more wide open areas.
Well, yeah, I would say that. I mean, obviously, without going down the selecting a spot to hunt.
Right, that's a whole nother episode.
If you're in an area because you can have a lot of areas that look real great, but they don't have any browse in them. Might be all alders. It's all wide open. And the only way you're seeing a moose going through there is if they're trucking through there on their way somewhere else, right? And so that that would be a consideration too. Is when you're selecting your spot, and like you said, that's a whole other episode altogether. But yeah, I think they'll eat, especially the cows will eat through the days. And then if people that have really successful moose hunting spots typically are on where they have a camp and they'll shoot moose every year, and it's really consistent producing, all of those things. I think a lot of them are on travel corridors.
Yeah,
where they're getting moose that are moving from one place going to a rut area, or moving. Because I mean, they're even just across the river in 20A. The biologists we talked about it a bunch, and there's basically 3 subpopulations of moose. You have moose that live in the foothills and travel into the flats for rut. You have moose that live in the flats and travel to the foothills, and then you have moose that just hang out.
Yeah.
And so, rushing out there on opening day, yeah, you might get a crack at the ones before they leave, and then the resident moose. But you're also missing out on all the moose that are going to come in there
Right.
as they get, as they have their, rut migration basically. And I mean, moose can cover 15 miles in a day, no problem.
Oh, I can
And
imagine.
and just at a walk. Um, and so like I don't think you miss out if you don't get to that spot. And I think that's sometimes I think people get a little too wrapped up in scouting for moose. Um, and especially if you're scouting for bulls, I'd be looking for cows. Like the whole focus for me would be finding cows.
Yeah.
Like if you find those good spots where there's a lot of cows and they're hanging out, and you're eventually going to find a bull there. It's whether it's when you can be there or not.
Exactly.
Um,
And is he legal or not in that area?
right.
Yeah.
But just in general, I mean, at least you're seeing bulls, and you know, if there's a bigger bull, he's going to come challenge a smaller bull, and all of that kind of stuff. And so I would definitely like I think there's some advantage to scouting if you know the habitat real well and the terrain and how the moose move. I think there's a lot to it, but just that comes from hunting the same spot over and over and over, and like every year the moose come through this valley and they move down.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna put cameras up or find whatever it is. Go find the trails, go do some stuff like that, but I think just blindly throwing out trail cameras on moose trails or game trails is not super advantageous, because chances are by the time you see that moose on there, he's probably not there anymore. He's probably gone.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I've told a lot of people this when they ask questions about their moose spot or anything else, is that consistency you're talking about. That's the key to like really good moose hunting.
sure,
Is because when you learn the area like that, even if it's not the
best.
most gangster
Yeah.
moose spot in the state, but that area really well, and where the moose that pass through there are going to be. That's your biggest advantage. Like just committing to a spot, like
100%. And I mean, like, it's kind of interesting because I'm not going to say. I mean, anybody that kills a moose every year is a good moose hunter.
yes,
Right. I would never take that away, but I know a guy that hunts a different spot in the state every year and kills a moose.
yeah,
He doesn't hunt the same location, same game management unit every year, and he kills a moose every year. That's a really good moose hunter.
yeah,
Right. I mean, I don't even know if he uses a 4-wheeler. I think a lot of it's just spot and stock and hiking and packing and doing it the hard way. But, yeah, I mean, if you think about that in and of itself, like you just find a spot and you go out and you take off, you're like, okay, this looks moosey. And then you kind of start reading, and that just comes from experience doing it. There's no substitute for like looking through and finding a spot and going, okay, this is the likely travel routes. This is all that kind of stuff. And
I think you would have to have a lot of knowledge on the animal to do what he does.
well, it's not just a lot of knowledge on the animal. It's behaviorally what they do in, say, like you're in the foothills versus in a swamp versus
right.
behaviorally, like what they do in each one of those, and then how you're going to set up, right? And I mean, honestly, the biggest thing is if you're talking, when you're talking about moose densities, a really exceptional moose density is a moose per square mile. So if you can look over 4 square miles in that area, you should see, a bull. Theoretically, if it's, about 25% of the population's bulls. So if you're in an area that's, 0.3, now you're talking about looking over 10 square miles to see 3 moose.
Right.
And you may not see a bull in there. So picking the right spot is the number one thing, right? I mean, it's a numbers game. And obviously there's areas that are higher density.
Yep.
And there's areas that are lower density. And there's places that moose travel through, and being able to identify those and things like that, and going through that. And I would say it's kind of case by case and location by location, because you get some places and they might be going to a burn. They might be going, and that might change after a few years, and then they're going to go to a certain, like willow area or like along the river, different things like that. and just in general, I mean, the biggest thing is looking for willows or looking for browse and being able to identify what's browse versus what's not.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know if any other questions related to that.
Yeah. No, it's just a lot of trial and error, honestly. It's getting out there and doing it and then educating yourself. Hammer Bullets produces what we at the Northern Hunter consider to be the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are easy to load, extremely accurate, and best of all, they're always in stock and ready to ship. The guys at Hammer designed them so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, it sheds its petals, initiating a massive energy dump while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration. These bullets are built with 100% focus on how they perform on game, and their proprietary designs produce great BCs with specialized pressure grooves for amazing inherent accuracy and speed. They have a minimum expansion velocity of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots, but with no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity round like the Weatherby 30-378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com and use discount code TheNorthernHunter to drop the hammer on your next adventure.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, if I was going to try and spend time scouting, it would be focusing on really reading the habitat, looking at some of those things and looking, okay, there's fresh browse. It's like we were talking about at the airport, right? If you go into a willow patch and none of it's been browsed, none of it's old
It's not
browse,
a good sign.
that's not a good sign. That's right. There probably are no moose there for a reason, whether it's by design or,
We bear hunt in some prime moose habitat stuff where there's no moose,
yeah,
but there's lots of bears.
yeah. And so being able to read that, looking like, and how much of it's browsed, and then, a lot of, I understand why people want to e-scout and do stuff like that. I don't think you can e-scout for moose very well. You can identify some bodies of water, you can identify some terrain, you can identify maybe even vegetation as far as whether it's spruce or deciduous, whether it's low or high, but you can't actually do anything until your feet on the ground. Because what looks good turns out to be all alder, and they got to pack a lunch to go through there.
Yeah, and so do you.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
and so you're just hoping to see one walking through there. And why would they go through there? And so I think, a lot of it has to be kind of, you have to be flexible in terms of like, yeah, you have a game plan and then it changes based on what you find when you get there, especially if you're new to it and, you're looking for stuff. I mean, learn to identify willows. I mean, most people know what birch looks like, or figure it out real quick. Aspen, and then what's actually browse versus out of browse, especially if you're like looking at a fire or you're looking at something like that. Really, standard browse height is 1 to 2 meters. Anything above that is outside of it. That doesn't mean they won't eat it. It just, that's not typically where you're going to find them. In the wintertime, they'll walk over that stuff and eat it down off the top. But, and I mean, even in desperate, they'll do it in the summer, all of that stuff. But generally, what they're looking for is browse in the 1 to 2 meters.
And
some
easy access for them.
Right. I mean, it's at head height.
Yeah.
They're not having to lay down to eat it, and they're not having to walk over it and break it off to eat it.
Yep.
And if you start seeing things like that, or you start seeing, it's called brooming, where the willows end up looking like a bristle broom, where it's like a straw broom, where it keeps breaking off and like more and more branches,
Multiplying.
Yeah, well, because what'll happen is they'll break it off, and then it'll get a new shoot,
And
then
two will come out of that.
Well, they'll eat it, and then another one will come off, and pretty soon it's not straight willows, like long, skinny willow stringers. It's all broom. And so you start seeing that, and you're looking at areas that moose are nutritionally stressed. Because in order for that to happen, you have to be eating past the first year, like what grew this summer, basically.
Right.
And and if they're eating past that, you're getting into other plant defenses and things like that that are not as beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, and then you start looking at, I guess like birch and stuff like that. Well, I mean, once it grows out of the height, then there's a whole bunch of things that happen, but they'll have plant defenses when they're low, and then once they get up way high, they quit doing it because there's no need. But those are, like if I was trying to figure this out where I was going to go hunt and start calling and do those things, that's how you have to do it. And the other thing is, if you live in Alaska and you want to like do this, and the best time to go is, and it sucks because you'll miss this season, but go out there in October.
Yeah.
Go out there after hunting season and go play around with them.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, you're not gonna do too much. I mean, most of everything's been done that's gonna be done. So it's not like you're gonna ruin anything or disrupt the rut, and play around with it. See if you're getting responses. See if you sound like a moose.
Right.
Go
right.
listen.
Go dance with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go do projects in your yard if you live out in the drink.
but that said, be prepared because you very well could get challenged by a bull and you're not out hunting, and now you've got a whole nother situation to deal with.
Do you remember that video I sent you when I had that one come into the yard?
Uh-huh.
It went walking through the yard and it
Yeah.
took off and crossed the road, and I started grunting at it, and it turned around, it came back in, and it was just turning its head and stuff. And she's like, stop messing with that thing. But it came back in the driveway and it was posturing and it was raking stuff. It was pretty cool to see, but I was like, wow. All right.
It's all fun and game till it rakes itself on your truck and
Right.
Oh, it was like walking between cars and
Yeah,
stuff.
oh, yeah.
And I was like, all right, time to go.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, and like I said, once they get kind of tuned up, I don't think those human scents matter
Mhm.
until you're trying to pose as what they're looking for.
Right.
And, and then I think that matters. Like I said, if you smell like you've been in the woods for a week.
Yeah. Bring your moose wipes.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about the vocalizations that we do with these moose. The cow calls, bull grunts, and all of that stuff. What would you say your go-to is? I mean, obviously, and I'm going to preface this by saying it's all dependent on the area and the moose in the area. But like, if you're blind calling, what are you doing? If you're out there for like the last 10 days of season.
Well, I can tell you're not going to go wrong scraping.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't go wrong scraping. And you can use that to cover up sound too.
I've done that.
Like definitely, scraping will kind of give you the idea of what's going on, right? If you scrape and you get any kind of response, you get a cow call, you get anything like that, you get a bull challenge, obviously that's a good spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, probably every hour for, 10 I don't like to call as long as a lot of people do, where they'll call for 20 minutes or something like that. And yeah, I would say usually, later in the season, I'd probably put out a cow call and see what shakes out,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of play it by ear. If you cow call for a couple days and you don't have anything, maybe try mixing a bull grunt in there. Doing, like kind of like what you were talking about, scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't get as over wrapped up in that. What I would do is be turning directionally.
Yeah.
And away from you, towards you, quartering, making sounds. Because I mean, you can make a lot of sound like it's coming from somewhere else just by how you change it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you've got anything that's directional, like a birch bark, megaphone or one of the pole magnets. Just changing that directionally, quieting down.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the other thing is if I was calling, I would start quiet and work my way up. I wouldn't go in there, blasting
Right
off the bat. With the exception of if there's a bull in there, and you're getting into that later part of the season where any challenge they're probably going to respond to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and I knew there was a bull around. I would think about just bull calls, but I would do bull calls and then turn around and do cow calls.
Right.
I mean,
right.
really, if you're doing a bull call, you're expecting it to be within earshot range back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you look all that over and there's nothing there, I wouldn't spend my time doing that.
Yeah.
I would just cow call and
Well-
see what shakes out.
And I think that's why a lot of that is, when you're blind calling, a lot of guys say just stick to the cow call.
Yeah.
Like, because, unless there's a bulwark in that area, he's right down in this drainage somewhere, even if you can't see him,
Right.
and you're just trying to draw him out. The cow
Right.
call's that one that really travels that distance.
Right. Or like if you've seen a bull and you just couldn't get to him, and you think he's still hanging around and you get into that area, like the example would be like if you were floating and
Mhm.
you saw a moose there one day and you wanted to, and you're stealthily moving in there, slipping in there. Yeah. I'd probably start with a bull call and see. And if there's cows around and no bull, you're going to get cow calls back.
Right.
And that might mean, hey, I'm going to hang out here and see what happens. And I also just in my head, I wouldn't cow call if I wasn't somewhere where a cow moose would be.
Right. Right.
I'm not going to be cow calling coming down. Like, say I was floating a river,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be cow calling coming down the river.
Yeah.
You could bull call. Like he's walking along the bank and
Sure,
you're doing a bull call and then you wait a couple minutes and you do another one and you might get something to come out to the river and challenge you.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're trying to come in there, especially if it's real twisty turny and it sounds like you're getting closer, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't cow call because if you cow call, that bull is going to go to where you were, not where you are.
Not where you're floating to. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you're going to, do something like that, that wouldn't be a bad route. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the bottom line is you're trying to imitate the animal, right? And that doesn't just go with the vocalization sounds. That goes with the behavioral sounds.
Yep.
You've got to make sure you're not doing, stuff that would be unnatural for a moose because they'll key in on that too.
Right.
I mean, they'll know something's up.
Yeah, for sure.
And-
yeah. And, one of the things, and I don't know, I mean, maybe somebody can school me on that, but I've always people talk about like putting water in something, pouring it out and making it sound like
like a cow's urination.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll be honest. I don't think that sound's going to travel far at all.
I don't think it's meant to be honest with you. I think that's another one of those if you're dancing with something and just trying to get it to come in.
Right.
From my understanding when I've heard about that.
But just in general,
yeah.
I don't think that sound is, it doesn't, it's a natural sound.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like scraping or anything like that. That is not natural.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of, I mean, you have water that makes noise all the time,
it's
right?
trickling anyways.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're along a river, you're never going to hear that over anything. I mean, it has to be dead quiet.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's a valid.
I've never put much faith in that one. I've heard that for probably a decade now. People recommending that, but I've never. I'm kind of on the same board as you with that.
But I would, like the one thing is, like I said, scraping. And if you're challenging a bull and you're trying to get him into the open, obviously he's gonna, you have to think about that, right? If he's gonna circle around to try and get you because he can't see you.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that might be worth having would be a decoy. If you're really into this and you want to screw around with some moose,
yeah,
having a decoy might. But
I've looked at some of those. What is that? The Montana decoy?
Yeah. But I mean, I know guys that literally just take cardboard and make just a shape.
Yeah,
and they'll flash it through and that's kind of where the shoulder blade is nice, something like that, where they can get a glimpse of it, where you can hold it up high, or even a boat paddle. That's why I like that.
Yep.
You can stick that way up. Now, chances are, if you see a moose that's as tall as you holding a boat paddle up, it's probably not realistic. But I don't know that they're judging that.
So that depends on who's holding it, but
right. But but I would be violent in that in that area. I mean, especially if you've got a glimpse of this thing and it's a good bull,
Yeah.
that's probably not going to back down from a fight, and you're
Mm.
trying to get it to close that distance. I would be pretty violent.
Yeah. Be aggressive with it.
Well, just on the trees, I would be making it. What I would do is I would make your location known,
Shake
then
some brush.
really shake it, like shake
Yeah.
big trees and stuff like that. And ideally, what you want to do is have a spot where they're going to circle to try and get wind on you, and you can wait for them to come in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if say the wind's blowing from left to right, and they're coming from your right, and you've got an opening over there, that's where they're going to come in. That's where they're at least going to get over there. That's where you're going to get your shot.
Right.
And so they might be over to your right, but you're calling to the left. I mean, you're calling at them, but they're going to come to the left. That's where you're going to anticipate everything happening going down.
Set your ambush.
Set your ambush, but and that's why you may want to make that location fairly well known, is so that you're almost forcing them to come around to that opening.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. You're playing the animal's behavior. I
right.
mean, that's
right. You're anticipating that. I mean, and they may just come right in on a string to you. I mean, they may just, like a bulldozer coming through there. They might come right at you, and that's a chance. But cool. Now you got a moose at 10 yards.
right.
But if they try and work around,
yeah,
that would be the.
And that would probably be the later you get into the season, they'd be more inclined to come kind of more right at you as they're getting kind of more testosterone filled and
more
just
tuned up. Yeah.
Yeah, just dumb.
Yeah. Well,
focused on fighting and
yeah. And another thing that I think goes kind of missed maybe is smell. Using your sense of smell when you get into some of those spots, and you need to know what a moose smells like, and you need to know what a bull in rut smells like.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get that smell, you'll know if there's something moving around on you or coming in, getting close. I mean, like, because it's pungent and it's strong. It's not just I caught a whiff. Like, you get it, you're gonna know. And so I think, I mean, or if you're going through an area and you get that smell, right? You're checking out a spot. Like, I think that's a big one.
Kind of like with bears. I've whiffed bears before.
Yeah.
I've smelled a lot of bears out in the woods, hiking and stuff.
I used to think that was nonsense.
Right. Yeah.
Until I shot a few right after that, smelling that smell. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, and I think there's a lot. I mean, it's caribou are that way. I mean, you can smell a ruddy caribou.
Oh yeah,
a long ways away.
Smell it 6 months after you shoot it,
when it's in a garage either.
Yeah, you can tell when your neighbor has a rutted out caribou in their garage.
Want some meat?
But no, I mean, just really, that's one of those things that I would. I think it gets lost, and I think people miss it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like I said, if you're kind of slipping into an area or you saw a moose go across the road, or you saw something like that and you want to go investigate, use your sense of smell. And that's another example of where I would probably scrape my way in if I'm moving into something. Like if I saw a moose moving or I'm trying to get close, I wouldn't hesitate to scrape a little bit, because you either have to be like a ninja and quiet,
right,
or you got to sound like a moose going through the woods.
Well, and I was just gonna say, I don't know how much you've done this, but like when I'm going through thick country, which a lot of like the lower areas you're gonna hunt, you got to go through some thick, right? Like, and a lot of it's dry, a lot of it's been dead for a while. If I'm in an area where I can't be quiet, or it's just way too much work to be super quiet, I'll do exactly that. I'll scrape along the way, and then I might even stop and grunt a couple of times. Just hang out for a bit, get quiet, grunt a little bit, and then maybe move some smaller stuff to sound like a browse, and then move on and keep scraping. I mean, just to kind of, like you said, sound like a moose.
People I've always talked to that are successful moose hunters, they're like, don't try to be quiet.
Yeah,
because you're not going to be quiet enough to. You're going to make noise, and it's going to sound like a predator animal. So just be a moose. Just be clumsy and loud.
Just be a moose. You must be the moose.
I've had guys advise that, but
no, and I full-heartedly believe it.
I've noticed that too, walking around like at my house and stuff. Like, if you're creepy, they'll bail.
Yeah,
but if you just kind of like you're just clumsily walking in, like,
Even in the winter, it seems like that too.
Yeah.
Like if
I
you're
always
trying to sneak, you'll see them like they're walking off, like kind of.
Well,
It's weird.
Well, even last year, we had one. We walked right up to it, doing exactly that, and it didn't bust until it saw us.
Mhm.
But like all the noise we were making, walking through the brush and stuff, it didn't care at all.
And they're pretty loud too.
Oh yeah,
I mean, like
Yeah.
when I'm at home and they're cruising through the yard. I mean, you're like, whoa.
yeah.
well, I've got a buddy of mine that we were doing the archery hunts around town, and we started joking about it. We were like, we're just gonna give up on this and just put a bow on a sling and put on jogging suits and go run around, and they won't have a clue what we're doing. Just jog right up next to them and pull out your bow and stick them with an arrow and move on. Because, you're moving all stealthy and they're like, what's going on over there? And you're, in your, red, white, and blue jogging suit heading through the forest. That doesn't belong there. Cool. Yeah, they're leaving. But yeah, I mean,
Psych.
yeah. Like I said, I don't think, I mean, and I'm not the biggest fan of, I mean, I like camo, don't get me wrong. I have a bunch of it for waterfowl hunting, but not necessary.
Yeah.
Dull colors.
Mm-hmm.
I
100% believe in that too. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest thing is doing a lot of scraping. I think you can get a lot accomplished with just that. Even if you don't know what you're doing, you can't screw it up.
Right.
As long as you don't do it too frequently. 20 minutes, an hour, 20 minutes out of an hour, and give it some breaks in the middle of the day where there's you're all you're doing is giving away what you're doing and where you're at. But during the hunting times.
So I've heard you mention that a couple times. So when you say 20 minutes, are you saying like people do it for 20 minutes straight?
Yeah,
give or take.
I mean, I've seen people sit and call for 20 minutes straight.
Wow.
I mean,
I don't think I've ever called for that long straight, to be honest with you.
No, and if I was picking out an area, especially late in the rut, like if you were hunting the 20th through the 25th through the last 5 days, that you can do that, and where you're really getting into the rut, yeah, you can call for 20 minutes. You could definitely sit and cow call for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that probably gets us to the last question about what you had.
Well, somewhat. But what kind of paraphernalia are you using to make those calls?
Just mouth.
Just mouth.
I'll use a funnel call, whether it be the bull magnet or piece of birch bark rolled up.
Mm-hmm.
I've used like oil canisters, anything to help push that sound out.
Yeah.
That's probably about it. I mean, I played around with all the other ones, the string, the wet string.
Yeah, I would say the wet string and the coffee can is the one that intrigues me. I haven't tried it yet, but I've watched a lot of videos on it.
And
it's more like grunty though.
Yeah.
It's not like a multifaceted
Yeah, I mean,
call.
you'd have to like take off running for like 20 yards to be able to make it a long cow call.
Yeah, right.
Here, hold this. I'll be back.
But yeah, that, and I've actually seen guys use those bottles for scraping too, and they'll keep it in their pocket, right? Because now, I mean, the thing's half of a quart oil, plastic jug.
Yeah,
that has like a good tone to it. Like if you take the lid off,
you take the bottom, cut
and
the
you
bottom
cut
off.
the bottom off, and you
Yeah.
leave the top open too. It gives it a really tingy, like that scapula kind of sound.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which that's what you're going for when you're scraping. You want
right. You want it to sound like bone on wood or bone on brush.
Exactly.
And I mean, I guess that's one thing I would say is if you're doing the early stuff, I would be scraping bigger trees and not brush.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the later you go, because with they're rubbing off all their velvet on something solid.
Exactly.
And I mean, and you'll find those trees that have no limbs left on them from about 10 feet down. They're just abused.
Another good sign there's poles around.
Yeah. Or at least there was.
Yeah, right.
And then as you get later, they'll rub on like willows and stuff. I mean, and that's like where you get like that brownish color, right? Because I mean, when the velvet comes off, it's a reddish white and almost white. And then they're basically using all of the plant material to make that brown.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're rubbing on smaller stuff, and depending on where you're at, I mean, alders can get bigger, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches in diameter,
Oh, sure.
and they can really rub on that. But yeah, I mean, they'll rub on any of that stuff once as you get later. So, but early on, they're going to be breaking on big stuff, trying to get all that velvet off, and then
Mm-hmm.
progressing to
I've
small.
played with that coffee can thing like in October
Yeah.
and at the house just tinkering, and that seems to elicit some responses.
That seems like that would carry for a ways,
well, and
too.
it's you take like the dude that showed me how to do it. You take like a tin coffee can,
Mm-hmm.
and then you poke a hole in the bottom, and then you get like a piece of leather. I use like a lace off of like a slipper, got like I don't know, 14 inches out of it.
Yep.
And then I took that and I went and I slid it on a spruce tree and got all the sap pitch on that piece of leather
Oh.
because it makes it stickier.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you take that, your hands can get pretty cold too doing this. But when you wet that
Mhm.
leather, it gives it that ting,
Mm-hmm.
and you hold that can and you just pinch that leather at the base of that can and you yank on it and you slip your fingers across it and you do like if you can get your fingers in like a puddle, like I say, it will get cold because you can't do it with gloves on. It
Right.
won't work with gloves on, but it is loud.
And you can do it with 550 cord.
That's what I've heard of people using.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah,
the
550
pitch
cord.
is the ticket though.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
get that pitch on there and it gives it that
Makes it sticky.
it gives it that tone and
Yeah.
it makes it sticky because if you can just yard on a piece of leather or a piece of 550, but if you get it pitchy,
Yeah.
that's where it's at.
Yeah, you
rub
get that
in there.
Resonant,
And
resonance carrying into the
Mhm.
coffee can.
And for anybody that's super confused about what we're talking about right now, imagine the sound you used to annoy your parents with, moving the straw up and down in the soda cup
Yeah.
at McDonald's, but on steroids and intentional and like very different. But that's the concept. Is it's a
And it is loud.
it's a friction based sound. As you're dragging that. that
Well, I mean, and there's actually quite a few good YouTube videos out there for folks that want to find it. I mean, there's a ton of them. I just had a vision of like when we were kids and we had the like telephones with the two cups.
Yeah, it looks like that. Just bigger.
One telephone.
It's one telephone,
Yeah.
way bigger.
I was just thinking, I wish I'd have known about that when I was a kid. I could have got the other person real good. Can you hear me?
Another one of those calls that I've never tried, but I've always been curious about how they work. Is those you see them at Sportsman sometimes? I think it's Primos makes them, but it's a cow call. It looks very much like those bull magnets, but it's reeded. It's a reeded call,
Yeah.
and I've never tried one before because I've never bothered. I mean, I use the bull magnet, the fiberglass megaphone one.
And it's an
'Cause-
open read.
Yeah. And I've always been curious how that would work. I had no idea if it sounds right. Because I don't know. For me, I've always used my mouth to make the moose sounds.
Yeah. I don't know how you'd get that, how you transmit that nasally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you just think about a moose, right? They've got like a 2-foot long nose.
Yeah.
It's going to be nasally if
It's
it's
like
coming
that
out.
whiny, nasally sound.
Yeah. I mean, and trying to extend that. I mean, and that's what you're trying to simulate with that call, right? Is that
Mm.
longer? But I don't.
You know what this means, Chris?
What's that?
We're gonna have to go buy one and then do like a side by side comparison. And maybe do a little minute film on the
Well,
Eustis.
Well, the better question is, how do moose like it?
That's the ticket.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do moose like it, or do?
They keep
the
selling
reason-
it, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
The reason I mentioned like the open read like that is you got open read and closed read calls, and closed read calls are generally sort of easy to navigate your way through in the learning process. Open read calls, you have to learn where to put your teeth and adjust to make and slide on that read. It's sort of like running a coyote call or
like that wolf howler I've got.
Yep, and that
Yeah.
can be, which is cool too, because you can get you know, like coyote calling and stuff's very, very similar to that kind of stuff. But I would be intrigued by that. I'd be
Mhm.
interested to toy with one of those.
I might have.
I
to,
like hand calling with open read calls for other stuff, and it's
you can get a lot of good, rich sound out of those calls. Whereas like with a closed reed, you're generally limited to what that's going to produce. That's kind of you can palm it or like bend that call or do different, like Carl's saying, muffle it or put your spin on it to an extent.
But you get what you get.
But you get what you get. In an open reed call, you can really get silly.
Yeah.
You know,
I might have to invest $34.
we'll just get those alcohol swabs and just like, you can try it, then I can try it.
We'll just have to stick it through our...
Wait till one of us thinks we have COVID.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll just have to cut a hole in our masks and just put it through the mask.
Well, you know, the one thing I was going to say, that if there's anybody out there that makes the moose calls, the one thing that'd be nice is if you put a handle on it so you could hold it close to your mouth. Because you're trying to hold it like right up against your mouth. And if you're trying to do a moose call the way like I was shown how to do it, you don't have enough fingers to even hold that thing up to your mouth very well.
You know, it'd be cool, like a fabric, like some fabric loops or something, like on some rivets or something.
That's exactly what I was thinking, like a webbing handle that was riveted in there.
And have it like with a couple slots where it's like you can maybe get 2 fingers in it to get like your last finger, like your pinky.
Yeah.
So that you can utilize your index and all that.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you're putting your pointer fingers up on your nose,
right,
and then you're getting your thumbs down wrapped around your larynx,
and your middle fingers up on your nostril above your nose,
right, right. Like you only have a couple little fingers. You got your ring finger and your pinky to hold that thing up against your mouth, and then try and move it around and make directional calls and do all of that. It'd be nice if somebody would do that.
Yeah. Well, $1 million idea, somebody.
Dude, I want to try that wolf. I want to try that wolf call you got.
Yeah,
you're always.
I'll bring it over.
Yeah, I want to get silly with that. I'm interested.
It's pretty sick.
I got a wolf call that's was originally designed as an elk call, but there's a way that you manipulate it that it drops out, kind of like how you hear wolves. They have that like that real like sharp howl that kind of the tone drops and then it kind of it drags out. You can get that sound out of it, and it's pretty eerie. I've given myself the creeps before out in the woods.
Well, and the weird thing, so this one's made by it's an elk call, but it's the acronym ELK, and it's the company's name. I don't know what I'd be lying if I said I remember what it stands for right now, but that's, if anybody's wondering, that's the one I've got, is the elk wolf caller. But,
you got to have you got to have some big pipes to blow this one I got, because otherwise you just get like the first portion of the howl. And it took me I'm like, this doesn't sound like a wolf. And then I remember like one night I got really like long-winded on that thing, and then it dropped into that like second segment, and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like a wolf. Like, yeah, buddy, I'm dizzy, but I'm getting it.
I'm dizzy.
I can't hit it if I see it, but
one thing that I think is kind of neat, like it's funny too, because sometimes where I'm at, the dogs will be going. You got all the dog teams and stuff, and like they'll be going, and you go outside and you lay on that thing, and they just stop.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get that like that classic response where every dog in the area starts barking or like howling. Right. It's like everybody just shuts up. That's
big
pretty
dogs,
fun.
The big dogs in town.
I don't know if I want that thing to know where I am.
Right.
But me and Addie will get going every fall, since he could like semi comprehend what's going on. Mm-hmm. We get going on and Sam's just like, oh my gosh, it just sounds like party toys around the house. We start blowing all the new predator calls, and he gets in on it, slobbers in all of them.
So what I'm hearing is I need to buy him a duck call and a goose call.
Yeah. That's like the equivalent of battery-powered toys for hunting families.
You know what that is?
You throw a couple specs in there and some other stuff.
Right.
You know what that is?
Hold on, I'll send you my Amazon list.
That's my ticket to not get invited over for Christmas.
I know, right?
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's funny too.
Every time I see Sam, she'll be doing that.
That's why we're not a video podcast yet. I'm just kidding.
No, it's fun though. It's kind of always that like we always get like tuned up over that, because it's that pre-anticipation of predator calling, and he gets all stoked. He's always like, Daddy, do a coyote house for the neighbors.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, dude, all right. We get going. Sam's like, that's enough.
Yeah.
First, she thinks it's all cute that he's into it, and then she's like, all right, that's enough.
Yeah.
Time to call it.
Well, and cow calling gets the same way when you really get after it. Like I've gotten a little lightheaded cow calling before because it's just deep breath after deep breath. Like
You just start seeing fireflies. You're like, all right.
I better breathe a little bit before something comes closer.
You start working out before you start learning how to call moose. What are you training for? You want to hear it?
Just got the little
Like, what's that, dude? What's a brother? Ew. What's that, brother?
Oh man. So this
I know one thing we were gonna talk about.
I think I was just about to bring that up. Oh, go for it.
Which one?
Oh, I'll let you go first. I'm excited now.
Oh, about the caliber selection.
Oh no, but we can jump into that.
Yeah, I mean
I was going to ask you my other question.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, 204 Ruger. I mean, come on, right? Varmint bullet.
So let's do the quick question, and then we can tackle the bigger question.
Okay.
So the quick question I had for you was, and this is a thing where if anybody reads the regulations, you'll realize we can use electronic calls in the state of Alaska for almost everything except moose. You're allowed to use a Fox Pro for predators. You're allowed to use a Fox Pro for plethora of things, right?
Yeah. Anything other than moose.
Yep. But it specifically states in there not for moose. And I wanted to pick your brain since you're like the regs guru. Like, kind of what's the background of that? Why is moose singled out? Is
Works
it 'cause
really good.
It works too good,
Because
or
you
it's not worth
you
it?
don't have to see fireflies if you run the remote.
Right.
Well, that's what I was curious. So, like, how responsive are they to e-calls?
They're very responsive.
really
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Well, and if you think about it, because the thing you're trying to do is get them to respond to a location, move to a location.
Mhm.
Well, now they're going to go right to that location because it's just going.
Oh, so if you were to just set it and forget it and just let them come in,
Right. And you can, get wherever you want to be to,
Right.
Plus, you don't have to worry about the wind. You can play the wind perfectly to your advantage and just let that thing go. And, I don't know how long ago they wrote that, but I know it was probably before they had digital sounds even. People would be running cassettes with moose calls on them.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if they ever made 8 tracks with it, but maybe even that.
Could you imagine?
What's that?
I was going to say we just had a whole demographic of our listeners go, "What?
What's that, brother?
But
You're just out there with your CD player."
Dude, I remember that. I remember when tapes came out, man.
Yep.
Good time in my life. Kind of like kindergarten. Best 2 years of my life. Man.
But yeah, no, I've always been curious about that, like why they got singled out. Because my curiosity was based around I had one of the cheaper Fox Pros, which was I forget the model number now,
like a Patriot or
I think it is the Patriot,
or a Spitfire or something.
Yeah, I think it was a Patriot actually.
Yeah.
And the wolf howl sound that comes on that is not realistic at all. It's very metallic sounding. It's very robotic, wolf sounding. So I was curious. There are actually moose sounds on that.
Sure.
Because I got the one that came preloaded with a bunch of sounds. But it's like, it doesn't sound real. It's like, and so I'm like, well, okay. Like, would they even respond to this? Because, I mean,
if they'll respond to somebody chopping wood.
That's true.
Or plucking a string on the bottom of a coffee can.
Yeah, that's very true.
or a chainsaw, like if it's, especially where it's really quiet.
Mm-hmm.
In places where that sound will travel that far.
Yeah.
I think it is super effective. And now you've got moose moving all day or, all night, whatever, and you're running this thing. Yeah, you're eventually something's going to hear it versus
time to go to bed. Better put the Fox Pro on.
Hope we don't get run over at night.
Very illegal.
Highly effective. Very illegal.
But
how well does that work? Very effective.
I'm pleading
Highly
the fifth.
illegal.
I'm pleading the fifth.
Sorry.
I can't remember. Yeah. Anyway, we won't
Anyways.
go. I said that about something. Does that work, Chris? Very effective. Highly illegal.
Highly illegal.
I think I said that to you on
did. Yeah, that's where
You're like, does that work, bro? I'm like, very effective. Highly illegal.
It's one of those sayings that just lives with me forever now. But anyways,
man.
but yeah, okay, cool. So that was my one question.
Yeah.
I had to wrap up that. I've always been curious about that.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
Onto, yes, calibers. We've gotten a lot of questions about moose calibers, specifically people coming up here for, let's say, a out-of-state, non-resident DIY hunt, or even just new people that moved here and they're curious because they've, hunted deer with a 30-06 in their home state and curious if that's enough. I'll go ahead and just arguably say, yes, 30-06 is enough for a moose with the right shot placement.
I would go even lower in the caliber range than that.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's the one we get the most questions about.
I would venture. I mean, I've seen moose shot with a 223.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that I would choose a 223 to go moose hunting, but I mean, I know plenty of people that have effectively killed moose with a 243.
Oh yeah, I mean, you go out in the remote areas of this state. I mean, they're not using 338s and 375s.
No, I mean 30-30s killed a lot of animals in Alaska.
Yep.
And so I would say, I mean
22-250 is a big one too.
Yeah.
That people out there like to use.
Yeah. I mean, it's just gotta. I mean, and legally it has to be 22 caliber center fire.
Yeah, I am not advocating
Right.
for that for like our normal like in town hunters that are going out, but it is a thing that's been done in the state.
I know a guy he's never had anything but a 22-250 and he's killed everything in the state.
Oh
with
yeah,
it.
it'll do it. But
And
you
he's
got to be the right shooter.
And he's got a bullet for every scenario. And
Yep.
Yeah,
I've seen moose hit with some big stuff too, and I've seen moose go back to eating after just getting walloped.
I mean, I've shot a lot of moose, and I've seen all different scenarios. A lot of them from work. I mean, we were using mostly 12 gauge slugs, reduced range, all the things that come with that. But generally, I would say that my choice for would be 6mm or bigger, whether it's 243 on up. I would, if I was really serious, I'd be looking like, I think 7mm would be a fantastic round. So
7mm works well.
280, 284, that size, that's 7mm on up. And I honestly wouldn't get too crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
you don't need to really. I mean,
moose are not that tough when it comes to what it takes to kill them, what it takes to like stop them, anchor them, all of that. That's a whole different discussion altogether. But I mean, to kill a moose, I mean, I think you put it through the boiler room.
A well-constructed bullet in the right place is the ticket there, not necessarily.
And
the
you
size.
have a big right place to find.
That's true. It's the biggest kill zone you're gonna find.
Yeah, I mean it's probably 2 feet by 18 inches. I mean, there's a lot of wiggle room there. And if I was looking though, if I was shopping, it'd be 30 cal. 30-06, 308, 300. something in that range, kind of the entry level, and without going into the utilitarian cartridges. That's
Yeah. I would say for me on the small end, the smallest I would really go moose hunting with would probably be a 270.
Yeah.
And that's just my comfort.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I feel comfortable putting in a moose, you know, is a 270. Whether it can be done with less or not is not really my concern. It's just that's what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good.
Mm-hmm. And 270's killed a lot of moose in this state. That's one of the original staples of Alaskan ballistics is 270, 30-06, 30-30, all of those ones. I mean, you look back at any of the old stories, that's what those old timers were carrying around.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good.
Now, I do currently hunt with a 338, and I like shooting bigger. If my personal, like I have a 6.5 PRC, and I mean, I guess you could easily kill a moose with a 6.5 PRC. Well, I shouldn't say I have it anymore. I gave it to my wife. It's her gun now. But
you should specify what 338, being that there's several flavors.
I shoot the 338 RPM from Weatherby. It's in a 24-inch barrel configuration. It's the Mark V Weatherby Apex. And with the 24-inch barrel, it's effectively the same as a 338 Win Mag. I mean, it's neck and neck. I mean, within, I think it's like 20 feet per second difference between the two. When you're in a 24-inch barrel. Now, it was designed to be shot out of an 18-inch barrel for more. It's a more efficient cartridge. It was designed for their shorter backcountry 2.0 lineup, so that you could have a shorter rifle and still have Magnum performance. You know, but they did offer it in a 24-inch. I've always carried a 24-inch gun in the woods. I'm comfortable with it. It doesn't get in my way. I figured I'd rather have the performance. But if you do end up getting one of those 18-inch barrels, it is going to slow it down quite a bit.
You don't really have to sell that to a varmint hunting guy.
Yeah.
I got 40-inch rifles.
Right. but you know, 338 Win Mag is a big one. A lot of people hunt in the state with 338 Win Mag. For me, like with my one gun that I take for just about everything, I like to shoot the biggest thing I can shoot comfortably and accurately. So I'm not going to go out there with a 416 Rigby, right? Because I can't shoot that comfortably and accurately as much as I'd like to. I need to be able to take it to the range and practice for a full day with it. With this 338 with a muzzle brake on it, I can do that all day long. It's not a problem. But for me, that's where I like to just whatever's the biggest caliber I can shoot regularly and accurately. That's where I like to be. That also offers my range. That's another big one for me. Is I you know, the bigger you go in caliber, obviously the shorter in range you typically get, unless you're really shooting a cannon. You know, I mean, like most 375s aren't going to shoot as far as most 300s. Right? They're just going to slow down farther. So picking out your range is a big thing there. How far you plan to shoot. Are you a 300 and under only kind of guy, or do you want to be able to reach out and touch 600, 700 yards, depending on your ethics and your shooting skills? I mean, but anything down, for me, down to 270, that's like my comfort zone. What about you, Chris?
Well, as far as rifle wise,
Yeah, calibers per moose.
I don't know. I mean, what I've been around, I don't have the experience that you guys do. I'm not a moose guy by any, I bears but like things I've seen is 300 Win Mag. That's kind of the dinosaur of that's another one of the staples
It's
of the
OG
30 cals and a lot of bullet versatility. And I know a lot of guys that have killed a lot of tons of moose with a 300.
Oh yes.
My neighbor, he's a meat guy, fill the freezer kind of guy. He's always shooting 270. He is not a hunting guy. I mean, you can't even have a hunting conversation with this guy, and he kills moose consistently every year with a 270.
Yep.
I mean, he's like, I shoot a pie plate at 100 yards. I mean, this guy never fails to come home with moose. So, I probably wouldn't be the guy to ask, but I'm pretty savvy with the 300 Win Mag myself. That's my comfort zone, and I've killed a lot of big things with the 300 Win Mag.
Can never go wrong with a 300 Win Mag.
I mean, and even like me and Carlito were out doing some stuff, and I've gotten a lot better with recoil. Maybe that comes with practice and a little more like practice, and
You got a calloused shoulder now.
He's good at shooting with his eyes closed.
but
He's just worked the flinch into his strategy.
just like hopefully I'm still aiming where I was aiming before I closed my eyes. No, like I've been on, I don't know. I guess that's like something you hear everybody kind of go back and forth about being recoil sensitive, and I don't really appreciate recoil very much. And I know, some guys soak the recoil and it doesn't bother them. I really, really don't like a shy from recoil, and Carl and I've been out and I've taken pretty good like free-handed shots with a 300 Win mag, like very comfortably.
Yeah,
on big game animals, and it's effective.
And you don't have a muzzle brake or nothing on yours.
Nope,
just straight out the pipe.
Yep, 26-inch barrel, and I've got some other stuff, but that's always kind of what I have stuck to. And I know there's better things out there. It's a comfort thing. I want to break away into all these. I got that 375. Haven't shot it. I haven't even put a round through it, and I don't know. And then now I want to build a custom, and you can just get down these huge rabbit holes. You shoot other buddies' guns, and I shot a buddy's gun of mine that's a 375, and I'm like, I don't even, for another $500, I could build my own rifle.
Yes.
And not build anything. I don't need to build a Cadillac or, order a barrel, order an action. That action's probably going to hurt really bad, hurt the wallet. I'll be licking some financial wounds there.
I'll say this. A lot of those rabbit holes you'll go down are for sheer curiosity. Like you say, with your 300, you're like, oh, I'm sure there's better stuff out there. If it works for you, no, there's not. Like if that kills what you're trying to kill, no, there's not.
Well,
like,
there
might be better things on paper, like when you're looking at them side by side comparatively, maybe. But if it works for you, that's perfect. Same with a 30-06, same with a 270. If that's what works for you, that's perfect. You don't have to worry about it.
I mean,
like something I want to do, like what we were talking about, and I'd like to we got a buddy that's licensed to get into these kind of projects, have him present so that he's the hands-on guy, and you're keeping things within the legal bounds. But I'd like to take that 375 as like a sacrificial piece of equipment and
yes,
put
we were talking
light
about
stock
this.
on it and just start cutting it down and chronoing it and seeing where you start hitting that limit as far as performance, and then work up a heavy hand load and have something or work up a suitable hand load that's maybe a 250 yard and in just
clobber house.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like something that you can take into a bait station that's handy, and something that you could maybe throw like a 270 grain bullet in. Or I know I got one buddy that runs the 185s in the 375, and I mean I think he's getting like 3,100 FPS out of them, and he clobbers giant animals with this thing. And
yep.
I mean, maybe have some versatility in that. Just, I don't know. I'm like, I'd be willing to hack that pretty rifle up to play around a little.
Yeah. Well, the recoil is what you're talking about is what I was talking about with the comfortably and accurately shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because as you get into these 300 Win mags, 338 Win mags, 375 Rugers, not only does your range shorten up a little bit, bigger bullets, heavier bullets, wider bullets, stuff like that. Like 300 and 338 are good for long range, but unless you're shooting a Shy-Tac, 375 really isn't. But accompanied with all of
the
that,
snaps and pushes, and there's just different. They all have different behaviors too.
You've got to be able to handle the recoil.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to, because otherwise you're not going to practice. You're not going to get efficient with that rifle. It's not going to be an extension of your arm, and you're just going to miss or wound or not be the most ethical shooter you can.
Well, and then another thing too is you can start, if you're new, and I went through a course of this, you can just start developing habits you've never had before, and they're not good habits. And then like any habit, you have to break it, and you get into a rhythm, and it's very counterproductive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've shot moose for, few with 30-06, 308, lots with 12 gauge slugs. And like one thing I would actually say is I think 45-70 would be in consideration depending on what you're doing. I think that'd be a good moose round all around.
Oh yeah.
If you're not in big open country. And I mean I shot a moose and a big elk with that 338 rum that I have. And I mean, granted, I haven't shot anything twice with it, but both of those were.
Kills both ways.
but I mean, one was at like 8 yards, and the other one was at like 75 yards, and so I'm pretty sure anything I would have shot with either one of those, would have been dead right there too. So, I think I actually, I mean, Chris will tell you, I go pretty much everywhere with just a 308.
Mm-hmm.
And I
That'll
mean,
do perfect.
I got bigger guns and more power, and that kind of gets it done.
Oh yeah.
You know something I've noticed too? Being kind of like James, all three of us travel in the state for work, and anywhere I've ever been, you can find 308 ammo sitting on a shelf.
Yeah.
It might have a layer of dust on it, but it's there.
Well, and
that's true.
And 308s they're pretty versatile enough that they don't seem to be as ammo finicky from what I've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
No, and I mean you can get it in a short. I mean it's a short action, right? So you can get it in a lighter gun anyway if you want that. They're not super recoil heavy. Now if you're trying to shoot out past 300 consistently, there's better choices. No ifs, ands, or buts. But I mean, I don't think I've ever shot a moose over 150 yards, and I think the first one I shot was 150 something. I mean, definitely under 160 yards.
Yeah.
And that was bank to bank on the river, and I shot that with a 30-06.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see there being a lot. I mean, if you're calling moose and you're trying to get them close, I don't think the goal is to shoot them at 800 or 1,000 yards, right? I mean, if you're going to do that, there's, why are you calling? I mean, okay, cool. They saw me. I'm going to shoot it. Or they heard me. I'm going to shoot it.
And
I'm not good at calling because I can shoot far.
Well, and the one thing to think about, and I think we've mentioned this a couple times on the show, but with long range hunting, in the state of Alaska, there's a lot of terrain between you and that animal,
right?
And it might not be fun to get through it.
I mean, if I got to go get in the Super Cub to fly over to it, I don't need to shoot that far.
Like, you're not shooting pronghorn on the plains. Like, this is like, there could be cliff faces, there could be, rivers, there could
I
be
shot a
stuff.
caribou one time at like 419 yards. And I just felt so awesome about it. And this thing just fell over and died. And I didn't realize that there was like a whole nother gully like between me and this thing that I wasn't accounting for. And it was awful. It was absolutely horrible. It took me like 7 hours to get it back to my truck.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, dude, I'm going to be out of here. I was there. Headlamp.
One and done, baby.
Otter sled. Oh, dude, clobbered this thing, like sent the celebratory in-reach message to my wife. And she's like, nice. And then she's like, is everything okay? I'm still at it.
I just got to it.
Right? Everything's going great. It's rigor.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
I went to sprawl it out and flipped it over.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as far as like for me, for like calibers and all that stuff, I really would say that I don't think there's a lot of need to shoot past 300 when you're moose hunting.
Not
the
often.
Majority of it's in, and I won't say in close, but it's in normal shooting situations, and
Yep.
I guess if there's there, you could make an argument for a big heavy bullet in a lot of situations would be far better than a bullet going really fast. I mean, there can be brush and stuff like that you got to shoot through.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be the. I mean, and I know there's places where you can shoot 800, 1,000 yards or further and kill moose. I mean, but those are, to me, that's follow-up shot country.
Yeah.
No,
it's a good way to lose an animal unless you're really all you're cracked up to be.
You're right. Well, and I don't care how accurate you are. There's a lot that can go wrong in 2 seconds.
Yes. It's not flight time when you get out that far.
Right.
That animal steps forward one step.
Yeah.
Well, and you can ask Chris. I love long range shooting. It's a passion of mine. I love nerding out on ballistics and different bullets and different powders and different stuff. And it's like, it's keeps me up at night looking at my phone at 2 when I should be sleeping for work the next day, right? But like, and I went down that pathway of like long range hunting, trying to get into that, trying to find that caliber that's great at close range and great at long range, and like, you know, oh man, you know, me and my buddy, good night. We used to just nerd out together, and we would judge calibers, you know, based on, and this is all on paper, of course, but whether they were good out to 1,100 yards or 1,400 yards on a moose. You know, like could it do this? And this is based on the numbers that we're seeing, right? That's ridiculous. Like, and I got out of that so quickly. Like, so once I started, I don't know, like just like you said, there's so much that can go wrong. Like, it's one thing you're shooting a piece of steel, and you're trying to challenge yourself to read the wind correctly and to do, you know, get your elevation right and do all your dope.
The steel is always in the same place,
right?
Yeah.
And you can wait for the wind to pass.
Yes,
and I'm learning this backwards now.
Yeah,
shooting with some long range guys, it's a totally different ball game.
And it's great when you hear that ting from that far away and everything.
Right.
But like when it's a living critter on the other side of that, especially something like a moose, because like you said, you could hit that thing with a 338 Lapua, and sometimes they don't even act like they got hit.
Yeah.
Seen it. Like they'll just wander off. So you could get a perfect hit at 800, 900 yards on a moose, and maybe it just doesn't go down. Well, now you're 800, 900 yards away before you even start tracking that thing.
Yeah, you get over there and you're like, wait, was it here?
Yeah.
Was it there?
Yep.
No, it was over here. Well, no, look at that tree. You don't even know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, and not to say that, and you see these cool videos like these hunting channel thing. I watch them. I get all taken up with them. And my son and I.
Best of the West shooting
that's
and all
Saturday
that
stuff, dude. You know,
yeah.
sitting there with some bad breakfast and some coffee and
you know, if I'm on the wide open plains, like back home in Kansas,
that's it.
maybe, you know, but like
even then,
here, I don't know.
The thing about it is your follow-up shots. Cool. So you just took a shot and it took a second to get there, second and a half, whatever. It doesn't really matter. And by the time you react to what happened, cool, I hit it in the leg, whatever. I hit it low.
it's another 100 yards away.
It's another 100 yards away. And now are you adjusting dope? Or what are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you just
taking all that time?
Kentucky windage in that and just sending, firing for effect
Hail
out there.
Marys.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's the biggest issue I see with it is, I mean, if it's perfect and everything goes right, you'll eventually get there. All those things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what happens if it doesn't go right once it leaves the barrel.
Yeah.
And, what are you going to do? And like he said, if you're starting tracking and it's raining,
Yeah.
cool. By the time you get there 3 hours later,
Right.
there's no sign. I mean, you may not even have fresh tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the thing too. Like predator calling, I'll take some cranks, right? I mean, I'll like if I get something that's not dumb enough to march to the beat of my drum, right? I'm gonna start figuring out some distance and doing some calculations, right?
Yeah.
But like, and it's not that I value that animal any less, but there's also different factors in tracking. Snow is very telling.
Mm-hmm.
You have one color on the landscape for the most part,
unless
right?
it's snowing.
Unless it's snowing,
Yeah.
which I've had happen too. Yeah, I've walked up and kicked coyotes that are under 3 inches of snow that took me forever to find.
Sure.
And I'm like, whoa, that was close to not
Right.
getting that. I've also come back and found the ravens on them a week later, but it's you just have a different set of circumstances for tracking that animal.
Right.
Whereas like everything's brushy and the vegetation's thick or wet. I mean,
Yes.
that I don't shoot big game animals at long range if I don't have to, which you really don't have to. I think it's an ego thing more than anything else.
And I've met guys that have been hunting in this state for 50 plus years that say the same thing. Every moose they've shot is inside 200 yards.
Think about when you see them; they're usually at like 50 yards, 75 yards. They're popping out of something
Right in front of your bumper.
Preferably not then.
Your wife's telling you that they're going to hit one of the cars and stop doing that at 10 yards.
Well, I mean, kind of the rule that I've always heard, and I got a friend that always says that, is hold on hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you think about how big a moose is, and if you got 18 inches of drop, you can hold on hair and shoot a reasonable distance.
400 yards is pretty doable with a flat with a flat cartridge.
Oh yeah,
all day.
all day.
I mean, anything that we've pretty much rattled off will be there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, and so that's kind of what I would think about. And I mean, generally, I don't think you need to shoot as far as that. I mean, and
Yeah.
I think there's that surprise element too. Would that bullet travel over that you're gonna have to travel back over with meat and a full load, right? I mean, and some guys are into that adventure. But
well, and I mean, like, so the first moose I shot, it was on the same side of the river, but one bend over. I mean, it was like 150 something yards, and I mean, there's a good story there, but we'll save that for another day. But so I shoot it, and I mean, cool. I shot 150 yards. Literally, the pack was from me to you. What, 8 feet?
Yeah.
So there is. I mean, if you're in the right country, I could see where you could be taking some pokes. But once again, I mean, if that had gone on the river, now we got a whole different situation to deal with, and But yeah, so I would, and that was with 30-06.
Mm-hmm. Whatever, caliber you decide to go with for moose hunting, make sure it's good to the ranges you're comfortable shooting. And whatever range you're comfortable shooting, make sure you are well practiced at that range. That is another thing I'll say, because especially when it comes to long range shooting, I would venture to say, I'm not trying to throw it, any kind of hate any direction, but like half, if not 75% of the people who think they're skilled enough to do that probably aren't. And, you have to be very practiced, because it's not a calm day at the range. It's not level-headed. It's not, you are in a situation that's constantly changing. The conditions are changing. The animal's position is changing. The animal's movements are changing. The people around you, if there is anybody around you, they're changing position, changing things. The terrain is going to be doing stuff. You're going to be in a panic state, especially if it's your first moose. I like to tell people, keep it close.
I think something else worth mentioning is if you're new at hunting anything with the cartridge, you look at what kind of bullet design you're using, and that you with a quick Google search, you can look at the minimum velocity for that, what that bullet's rated to perform at. And I see a lot of guys get confused about this. They're, well, hey, how far could I shoot? Well, what kind of bullet are you shooting? What are you trying to do? And look at what the minimum velocity is for that bullet to perform as designed. And
1,800 feet is pretty typical. Some of the monolithics are higher than that, up in the 2,000 feet per second range. Some of the long range bullets that are soft lead or non-bonded you can get down to 1,600 feet per second range. Sometimes lower than that. Those ABLRs I think are rated down to 1,300 feet per second. Now I don't know.
And that's something you can research, and
because at that point too, you're also going that much slower. It's like all things to consider.
Well, my question would be, on a bullet that performs at that slow, is what happens at point blank?
That's the big question, and that's the hard thing to find with ABLRs online, believe it or not, because point blank performance, there's only it's been, I'll admit this by saying it's been over a year since I've looked into this, because I kind of got off that train. We use hammers,
but still,
it's, when I was looking into the ABLRs pretty heavily, there was not a lot of information about what they do close range, which that's the thing to consider.
A theater where you really put these things to the test, and I've done it myself and I've watched others do it, is in a bait station. You watch, you see these guys that are brand loyal and whatever and this and that, and you shoot a bear at 15 yards and that bullet doesn't do anything that it was intended to do. And I always get a kick out of that. I shot bears with Accubons at 300 yards and dumped them. And I've shot bears at 15 feet with the same bullet and never recovered them, with blood all over the place, and who God only knows what went where and what, I mean, it's a roll. It's hunting. It's a roll of the dice. There's quality control factors that go into some of this stuff, and
Was it made on a Monday or a Friday? And it's,
You want the Wednesday bullets.
you want the Wednesday bullets. just ramping up. You want the ramping up in the middle of the week to ramp down.
You want peak performance.
I don't know. You see a lot of this kind of stuff. And
yeah. Well, and that's, it's all, we could do a whole episode on that. But
I think just going with a quality bullet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think you need to get top of the line, especially for moose hunting. Get something that's going to perform, but don't, probably. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I've shot plenty of moose with blue box specials,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets a job done.
Oh yeah.
You know? I mean, 60 yards with 308, 30-06.
Yep.
Honestly, as long as you're going to get about 6 inches of performance,
Mm-hmm.
you're good to go, right?
And if you want to reload bullets and you want to use hammers, use discount code The Northern Hunter to get 10% off of pretty much anything on their website.
But
I know I hold a Remington core locks around on my beer wallet for several years. So a lot of stuff.
That was everybody's starter, I feel like.
mine were Winchester silver tips.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Those nice looking round.
The silver bullet.
Yep.
I think something I would add is, Carl got me on this kick long ago, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Well, is shoot till it's down.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in that. That's a lot, and you're going to get a lot of conflicting angles on that. You can't, you don't need to worry about meat loss if you're not finding what you shot at.
Yeah. You're either losing 5 pounds or you're losing, 300 pounds.
I mean, and I believe in that. Even like bear baits, if I can get a second round up, all my bears I shot this year were shot twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's whatever. Like, and I believe in that. Shoot till it's down.
I've always wondered why there's the resistance to follow-up shots. I mean, I understand the meat damage aspect of it, but
I think it's like a human nature thing. I think it's like hide damage.
Maybe,
I think I've always had that concept with like bear hides, but you can sew holes and they bolt.
Yeah.
Howitzer hole would hide well on a black bear hide. I mean, like, I don't know.
I have met people who are very opposed to follow-up shots, and it's always blown my mind why. If it's not down, it's not down. Like, if anything, that's the more humane thing to do, is just shoot it till it's down.
Yep.
Like, why would you watch it wander over let's say caribou?
I mean, I guess
caribou can wander a long ways.
I guess there's, I guess I would maybe take a little bit different approach there and say that if you have the vitals,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're on a meat hunt, you shoot a moose, you hit it in the vitals, and it turns, and all you have is a Texas heart shot.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And probably not taking that.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
But if I've got vitals, I'm going to keep shooting.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
a good clarification, because that's you don't just want to pump it full of lead. You want to pump it full of intentional lead.
Right.
Yeah.
See, I've had bears on their way out of bait stations just clobbered where I've fed them the old Texas Explorer there. And it's definitely taken some wheels out.
Yeah, and I mean,
it will. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, that's my version of hold on here. 30-yard shot.
but
trying to look through smoke plumes.
But I mean, and it's different when it's a toothy critter that can bite back.
This is true.
Yeah.
Versus a moose that you're, probably if you hit both of those hindquarters, you're talking 60% of the meat is getting damaged, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's ultimately what you're doing it for. If you're shooting a moose, I mean, you can't eat the antlers.
Right.
I don't know about reckless shots, but I had a caribou that I hit with a 300 Win Mag, and it just kind of soaked it and did the drunk wobble thing, and then just kind of just regained its composure. And I was like, okay, so I just aimed at the bullet hole that I just put there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And the second shot did a lot of damage.
And oftentimes your second shot's not going to be ideal. Right.
Right.
You might be able to get vitals, but it's probably going to be a steep quartering shot, or it's
Right.
going to be not the ideal angle. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes they'll run 100 yards and turn perfectly broadside. It
Right.
happens, right?
Yeah, you're
But
taking what you can get.
you can't
generally.
expect that. But you should always, I agree with Carl, you should always aim for the vitals. Like,
Right.
even if it's not the best angle, aim for the vitals.
Right. I mean, and maybe all you have, moose goes into the brush. Maybe all you have is a head or a neck shot.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I would take that as a follow up. I
Mhm.
might not take that as my first shot, but I would take that as a follow up in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I don't like neck shots on moose at all.
No.
They can soak up a lot of lead in the neck.
Yes, they can.
Um,
There's a lot of surface area there that might not be the ideal shot placement.
right. And headshot. Well, I mean, it's either a miss or a hit, and you see the results. But yeah, that's the one thing I would say is like after it's wounded, yeah, you send it
Mm-hmm.
until it's down. But if you want to be aiming for vitals,
Yeah.
Even with like fur, I'll do that.
yeah,
I don't care. And that is a total different argument. And you have guys that are like, they have their take on that. Well, you just shot that thing 3 times. Well, okay, cool.
but I've got it.
But
Yeah. But
as
I recovered
opposed to
it.
like running off and disappearing, and you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Diving into a hole somewhere and,
Or just never finding it.
I've
getting
had
away.
buddies like take their first shot on something, and it's like it's a good hit, right? But it's not the finishing touch.
Mm.
And I'm like, hit him again, and you could see that like that second guess, and then like there's never a follow up shot, and I'm
Mhm.
like, why didn't you shoot? Well, I didn't want to blow it up. Well, like, and then we just never recover it. And,
Right.
You know,
Right.
Well, and like I had an experience where I was shooting bears, and you weren't going to lose an opportunity for a follow up shot. It wasn't getting away,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean, and I watched bears get pancaked, anchored, get back up and run. I saw,
Yep.
I mean, a lot of stuff like that where I mean, it was down, and that's when you realize. I mean, and like I said, we weren't going to be taking follow up shots in that situation until you got close again, but you definitely had you see the need for it.
Yeah.
Shoot them till they're down, till they quit moving. And I mean they were clearly dead, and they would have died, and we could have probably followed them, but that's not humane.
And
No.
they just didn't know they were dead yet.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But and so that was kind of an experience for me is, like I've heard a lot of people, and I've taken a few bear hunting classes, like field judging and doing some stuff like that from somebody, and their whole thought is especially if you're you're on a brown bear hunt, you're on a grizzly bear hunt, and it's really a trophy hunt at the end of
Mhm.
the day. You shoot until that thing's on the ground.
Right.
And you don't want to go in there looking for a wounded bear. You don't want it to go where it wants to go. You want to deal with it where you want it on your ground.
Yep.
And so you just keep shooting. You shoot until you're empty or it's down.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just to wrap this part up, I mean, throw back to your story from earlier in the show. Your mentality when you're walking up to a down animal needs to be that it might not be all the way dead yet.
Right.
You hear stories all the time of people getting kicked by moose, or a moose, standing up when you're right on top of it because you stunned it and you got it down, and maybe it was hurting bad, and had you let it lay there for another 10 minutes or so, it would have expired.
Right.
But you walked up on it, kicked that adrenaline in, and now it's standing up looking at you.
Yeah.
And, exactly, like your situation there. I mean, you hit it, went down, and luckily, you were in the proper mindset to have your backup firearm present, to be able to take those shots at it as it came at you. But not everybody does that. Yeah, it's down, hand their rifle to their buddy and go run up to it, and it's like, you got to expect it.
Or have a bear reanimate on you. And
Yeah, especially with toothy critters, walk up to it until, prepared until you've verified death.
and make sure you're approaching it the proper way.
Mhm.
The way don't walk up to it head on,
Yep.
right? Approach it at an angle where if it wants to, take off, it's probably not going to try and get you on its way out. It's going to
Yeah.
go. One thing that's really interesting about moose, more so than like horses, right? Horses can only kick straight back.
Mhm.
Moose can kick all the way out at a 45-degree angle.
Yes, they can.
And just I mean,
They sure can.
for what that's worth. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
nowhere is safe.
yeah, but I mean, and like there was an example. Like, I'll be honest. I don't care what kind of handgun you have. I take a rifle over a handgun any day and every day.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I shot that moose twice in the head with a 44 mag with 300 grain bullets, and no result.
Yeah.
I guarantee if that would have been a rifle at that range, it wouldn't have been a question.
Right.
But you also got to hit a moose in the head at 15 feet with a scope rifle while it's coming at you. So, I mean,
Or take a good guess and hope and pray.
That's right.
That's where you're shooting with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
Wondering how that hoof's going to taste when it comes down. But yeah, I mean, that's 100%. I think the biggest thing is probably bullet selection in a reasonable caliber that you can accurately shoot, and just don't shoot too far.
Yeah.
Give yourself room for follow-up shots.
Keep yourself honest.
My thought with handgun is it's a deterrent.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's
if
your
you can get
insurance
that
policy.
animal to like turn and decide it's had enough of what you're feeding it, that's the gain in the sidearm.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, I mean the idea is you use your handgun to get back to your long gun, right? And that's pretty much what's going to happen there.
that's like our buddy that had the down bear situation this spring, and I was not going to cycle a bolt, and that 301 mag went in the weeds, and we went to the pistol, and I'm like, I got 15 of what we're doing here, plus one.
At that point,
and if this doesn't work, this is meant. Whatever happens is meant to be,
right? But no, I would.
His will be done.
I don't.
God, if you listening, it's your boy. Use a hand down here right now.
Right.
I hope you're watching this.
Right. Yeah. Your will be done, but I hope it's not this. Come on.
Could not be done right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, though, that's kind of my thought on it.
Well, gentlemen, I think we've pretty much covered just about everything.
We've exhausted that.
Yeah, we've about met our last week's time as well.
We shot it till it was down.
We put a lot of time in the studio, gentlemen, last week. So, do you got any closing thoughts as far as things to think about before moose season kicks off in a week for anybody listening?
No, I guess I haven't really thought about it.
Go bird hunt first. Wait till it gets good.
Yeah, let the woods clear out before you go.
Yeah,
let everybody use all their PTO up and go out there and clean up.
Yeah, Labor Day weekends for bird hunting.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably what I'm going to use it for this year.
I firmly agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for spending your evening with us again.
Of course.
Sharing all your knowledge. To all of our listeners, thank you very much for hanging in on this one with us. Moose season opens in a week, so get ready, get prepared. Make sure you've got your plans solid and your gear tuned in, because it's going to look pretty slim at the Sportsman's Warehouse come opening day. So, but thank you again for listening. If you have any questions, we have our website, thenorthernhunter.com. We've got a contact button there. You can reach us there. You'll get an email directly to our inbox. You can also reach out to our social media if you search at The Northern Hunter on either Facebook or Instagram. Send us a message. We do our best to answer as quickly as possible. If you'd like to support the show, the easiest way is to give us a rating and a review for what you feel about the content we put out. So 5 stars is always best, and a written review really helps people understand what they're going to listen to. There's also a share button next to every app, every episode on every app. So if you have somebody you know that maybe hasn't heard of the show before but could use the information that we talked about in this episode or any episode, go ahead and hit that share button and send it over to them. That's really, those 2 methods are the only way we get this show in front of more people. We've also got our partners page on the website with companies that have decided they'd like to sponsor what we do. We've got discount codes and the links for those right there. They're also in the show notes for this show, so just go to that if it's easier for you. And we've got our shop with merch. We've got hats, hoodies, t-shirts, all the good stuff. So if you'd like to rock the Northern Hunter logo around while you're wandering about, we'd appreciate it. And send us a picture. We'd love to see it. So, well, we've officially crossed into the 4-hour mark, gentlemen. So thank you so much. Carl, it's always a pleasure having you on the show.
I'll come back anytime.
All right. Chris, appreciate you hanging in there with us, too.
Heck yeah.
All right, to all our listeners, until next week, get out there, get after it. Good luck. We'll see you around.